Hola, hola, everybody. Welcome to one of our newest segments for this year as we're winding down for 2023. My name is Adriana Alejandre, and I'm the host and the founder of Latinx Therapy. And today we are going to be talking about secrecy within generational trauma, specifically among the Latinx community. But I know that this topic runs deep in many communities. So I'm sure what we are going to talk about will be relatable to others as well. But I want to go ahead and introduce to you all our guest for today, who is a very, very wonderful person, a friend, and a super intelligent colleague. I love her. Her name is Natalie Gutierrez, and she's a licensed marriage and family therapist working primarily with the BIPOC community, with Black, Indigenous people of color, who are survivors of complex trauma that range from racial trauma, sexual trauma, attachment trauma, and intergenerational trauma, carrying cultural and legacy burdens. Natalie's individual and group healing work blends the intersections of psychotherapy, activism, intuitive, and ancestral wisdom. And you will be able to see all of that as well reflected not only in the book that she published, which I have right here, The Pain We Carry. Sorry for the glare, but also on her social media platforms and in the interviews that she provides as well. Natalie is a mother of two on the journey of trying to break generational curses. So, with that, let's bring her in. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you, hermana, amiga, querida. I'm just so happy and honored to be here and always love sharing space with you.
Thank you. And I know it's been a while since we've shared space. I think the last time may have been maybe sometime during the pandemic on Instagram Live. So, for folks to check that out.
Yeah, you're right. I'm trying to think back what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a rough few years, but
Yeah.
I think it was definitely during the pandemic. So yes, head
Mhm.
out to Instagram Live. I think it's on my platform, maybe also on yours, but
Yeah,
check
right.
out
I
that
did a
conversation.
takeover.
You
Oh
did
my
a
gosh,
takeover.
yes.
Yes. So with that, Natalie, I know we're also limited on time. I'm going to pull up our questions here. I welcome you back then, but on this new platform for YouTube, so that folks can have more access because there's, people that are not on Instagram and want to hear these conversations. And, if the audio is good enough, I'll also publish it on the podcast.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, 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 yes.
Yes. So, all right. Let's, when you were talking to me about these topics, right? I always ask folks like, what are some of the things that you'd like to discuss based off of your work? You mentioned generational trauma wounds, and I'm wondering if you can define that. I don't know if it's brief, but if you can define that for our community, because secrecy is going to be a subset, a focus area of this.
Yeah, yeah. I understand generational trauma to be burdens being passed down throughout the generation, whether they are um, things that our family has said to us, whether they are things that we inherit, both covert and overt belief systems, patterns, just messages that we inherit, that live within our bodies and our minds and our spirits, and the stories and the narratives that are also woven into all the ways that our families, I want to say, show up in the world within which also impact the ways that we are feeling safe and unsafe in the world. And I think that generational trauma has roots in historical trauma, has roots in all the ways that the remnants of historical trauma, the lineages, the pain from our ancestors through enslavement, through colonization, through war and famine and genocide, all of the ways that the remnants of this influence how our families show up in the world alongside the cultural burdens, the cultural messages, the cultural isms, right? Like racism, like homophobia and transphobia and ableism, right? All of that, all the ways that the messages of the larger culture influence how our families also, again, show up in the world, but also what we are taught about these things. And then it keeps being passed down and passed down and passed down, right? Because we don't know any better, and we're not so aligned with secrecy, right? We're not talking about these things. We're not having hard, courageous conversations. We're just either bypassing or just avoiding these hard conversations, or not knowing how to have them. So that, in a nutshell, is how I understand generational trauma.
It's a very complex thing that I feel requires years' work of studying, and complex trauma evolves as well. And
Mhm.
from generation to generation, I do believe that we are getting more knowledge about it, and there are more people motivated to break generational traumas because we are also in a very privileged position to be able to learn about it. And when our families are in survivalhood, they don't have the same privilege to be able to emotionally access that maybe desire or that want to learn about it. And so with that, generational trauma wounds run very deep,
Mhm.
continue, and it takes awareness in order to break cycles. And we'll get into that a little bit more too. Let's go into what could be some examples of secrecy that we may see within our families, within our clients and community.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes up for me is the secrecy around mental health issues.
Yeah.
And there was a, I don't know, for folks that whether they've seen it or not, that skit with Bad Bunny recently in Saturday Night Live that happened with, it was Bad Bunny and Pedro Pascual.
Yeah.
There was a moment in that skit where, Pedro Pascual was like the mom that essentially didn't want her son to have depression, and was like, don't do depression, do something else, right?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the time that skit just spoke volumes for so many people, and so many people in our Latinx community really resonated with that, because a lot of the time there's so much secrecy around mental health struggles, right? There's so much either minimization around it, or plain old like avoidance overall. So the issue around mental health struggles is definitely one of them, but also I think the secrecy around disease and illness as well. I
Yeah.
think that tends to carry a lot of stigma to it. It's very stigmatized. I think we also see secrecy in our families around sexual trauma and sexual abuse,
Mhm.
whether it's us maintaining that secret within ourselves, or also kind of holding that secret from someone, from a relative that we know was sexually abused by another relative, and we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it, but it continues to happen. It continues to be a pattern, of course, unintended, but continues to be a pattern that's passed down throughout the generation. And then I also have seen intimate partner violence being
Mhm.
something else that is also very secretive within our family. And then also, things like addiction, right? Struggles around addiction can also be, or is also one of the common things that we tend to really hold secret.
Yeah, around sexual abuse, I see it also, and I've heard of it more broad, where kind of any legal issues are kept a secret. And we can even kind of umbrella term this in the sense of anything that brings shame, right,
Hmm.
within the family. Anything that when we believe that we are protecting someone else. And I think it comes from that, it comes from this. like you mentioned, like folks not knowing how to hold these conversations, and also from a place of wanting to protect someone, knowing that this silence will isn't prevention. I think, because around suicide, right? When we talk to many families, they think, I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to talk about it with them. I think if, I distract them, then they'll forget about it. It's something
Mhm.
that, along with any mental health struggle, it exists and it continues to come up within the person. And that person will continue to find information about that subject, whether it's among people at school or work or the internet, right? Like, everybody is curious about it. And, I think secrets are definitely going to come out in one way or another. So, for folks that are listening to this and are on either side of it, whether you're holding a secret within the family, generation, or community, or there's been a secret that's been held from you, right? There's intergenerational wounds attached to this. And these are
Mhm.
just kind of like 3% of the examples that we can probably give.
Yeah. Yeah. Fully. And it's hard. It's hard. And I think part of this is also, it's important to also weave in power and all of this. And you were sharing it kind of before too, right? Because I think, especially when in our communities we see a lot of machismo, right?
Mhm.
When we see a lot of machismo, it can be really hard for, women, and folks that identify as women to really speak out, right? To
Yes.
really challenge when there is the dynamic in our families of machismo, but then also of like, elders, and like, you're not supposed to challenge your elders, and you
Mhm.
can't speak out, and just even like setting boundaries can, within our families, can be something that feels threatening, especially for folks that aren't used to what's, the practice of setting boundaries, right? So setting
Yes.
boundaries or speaking up could feel like a challenge, even though we're not necessarily challenging in the spirit of like wanting to destroy the family, but it's actually like what you said before. It's a secrecy that's actually destroying the dynamics of the family. Speaking up and having these conversations done from a spirit of love and preservation, right?
Yeah. And with that, if I advocate for this a lot as a parent, as a member in the community, sometimes seen as a leader as well, whatever identities that you have, if we don't know the answers to something when someone discloses something to you, it's okay for us to say, I don't know what to say right now, or that's something I need to digest a little longer, but I heard you, right? It's okay for us to enter that, to say those words, to not know,
Hmm.
because when it comes to secrecy, sometimes you find out about secrets, or yeah, you find out about secrets and it's a shock to your nervous system. And you have so many questions running through you. For how long? Since when? Who else knows? Right? There's so much in your mind, in your body that goes on. People's temperatures change as well. Sometimes
Hmm.
people's tummies hurt, so there's
Hmm.
digestive issues that follow. And it's important for us to, in that moment, to also reflect on, what do I need in this moment? Right? What is my mental health? What are my emotions telling me right now how I could take care of myself in this moment? Because the wound runs deep. All of those pains and aches and thoughts you're feeling are intergenerational,
Yeah,
most likely from our ancestors as well.
right.
So, I kind of went a little bit out of order with our questions, and the next one was supposed to be how secrecy is connected to generational trauma. I feel we touched on that, but if there's anything else you wanted to add, I'll yeah, is there anything else, or should we move on?
Well, one thing that I think, just what you shared, that feels important to amplify is
Mhm.
shame. You had mentioned shame before, right? And the stigmatization around things. I think that shame is one of the things that is inherited, it's passed down from generation to generation. And secrecy and shame are in relationship with one another. So when we feel shame, and we feel more shame, we're likely to maintain secrecy, which then is going to build more shame, which then is going to create more secrecy. And so it's really just feeding this little feedback loop that we're a part of. So it just feels important to really underline what you mentioned around shame, because at the root of secrecy is shame. If there was no stigmatization around these things and we could have these conversations, we would probably want to be more open to having these conversations, and bringing to light things that have just been exiled and hidden. So at the root of all of this really is shame, and that shame is what is being passed down across generations, especially the more that we're not talking about the elephant in the room.
Absolutely. And again, like, I'm going to give some examples, general common examples as well connected to this, where I hear that people don't want to tell their abuelita because their abuelita of abuelita's age, or because of abuelita's health. And so they're like, no, like, let's not tell her that so and so got arrested, so and so will be out by the next day. It'll be fine. Let's go back to normal. People also know, that there's something going
Right.
on, and
Right.
there is a way to deliver it. And typically, because our nervous system is so dysregulated, we also don't know how to deliver it. And
Mhm.
sometimes we may think that in the moment is the best way, or maybe later on, but the best time to deliver a message que es fuerte is
Mhm.
when your nervous system is regulated.
Yes.
And so maybe I'll pass that on to you. Like, what does it mean to have a regulated nervous system, or how do we achieve that?
Yeah, I feel like I appreciate you naming that. And I think it's super individual, right? When
Mhm.
I think sometimes, especially depending on what we're about to say to someone, that we might feel our own activation, right? And I think what's important about that when we're thinking about regulated is that even when we're a little bit activated, we can still communicate a message, right? If we notice our activation and are maybe, like, I want to say, in relationship with that activation, I could still be nervous and communicate a message. I could still be super scared with what I'm about to tell abuelita, but also share it from a place of, like, noticing that activation rather than being fully, like, blended with it, if that makes sense. And I can notice that I'm activated, but I'm also rooted, right? That both are, like, really coexisting within. And I think I think it's important to ask yourself, is am I in the position where I feel like I can, in the sense of, like, am I flooded with these feelings? And if I'm flooded, then I'm probably going to need to be with that for a moment and move around or drink water, whatever needs to happen, whatever I have access to do in the moment, to at least settle my body enough. It doesn't have to be 100%. Like, you don't have to approach anyone from, like, a Zen, like, completely 0% activation,
Right.
but
Mhm.
can you, if you're flooded with emotions, can you just soften it to the point where you can kind of just, it can be like, it can walk beside you rather than be fully embodied, and then deliver the message from that place, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that I'm also very passionate about, in that even our own emotions are become a secret in the family, and people
Mm,
don't even know how we express ourselves, because maybe when we were younger, emotions had to be a secret because we
yep,
weren't emotionally safe to
yep.
express ourselves. And so now, obviously, as adults, around the people that maybe caused harm to us emotionally as a child, or perhaps in other ways, how are we going to express ourselves, right? How are we going to, deliver something tan fuerte? Um, and so I think that's where our community can benefit from learning about their nervous system and emotional regulation, and helping themselves somatically, because
Mhm,
we are also, culturally speaking, our people tend to express themselves more from their bodies,
mhm.
me duele el corazón,
Mhm.
me duele el estómago.
Mhm.
I feel stress right here, right?
Yeah.
And those are, especially when there's no medical condition going on, those are psychological forms of stress
Right.
that's
Right.
manifesting in our bodies. And
Right.
so I encourage everybody to pay attention to, your body's needs and how you can how you can help yourself feel emotionally space within your body, emotionally safe within your body to express with yourself and with the people that you feel and know that you are safe with as well.
Yeah. I love that. Being in relationship with yourself, witnessing yourself.
Hmm. Yeah. So that we also, don't have our emotions as a secret. So that people
Mhm.
know, I'm crying because, yeah, I'm upset. And this is something I see with a lot of parents. And when my son was little, it's something that I also experienced where I began to hide crying. And I remembered
Mhm.
my mom used to hide when she cried, but I knew she was crying as a child, and then I got even more worried because I was like, well, what's going on? Is something bad going to happen? I started forming anxiety at those points because I didn't know. The uncertainty is so frightening for children. And so it's better to let our children know, let people know, I have big emotions right now about something that can be resolved or that will be resolved. I don't know how right now, but I need to just cry in this moment. Or you're going to hear me scream in the room. I'm okay.
Yeah.
I just need to let something out. I need to go run and cry, and it's okay. I'm gonna be fine afterwards, but right now I look a little bit like a mess, right? Not
Yeah.
making our emotions so scary,
Yes.
um, needs to be something, that we also don't keep as a secret.
Absolutely. And to that, because I just think of like when we do keep our emotions a secret, right? When we do like, I mean, this ranges from like keeping our emotions a secret to like even making mistakes and just being imperfect. We are showing and modeling for our children. We don't have to be like these perfect little robots that like never cry and know all of the answers to things. And, that we could model the power and imperfection and just being in the moment, that we could model what it's like to have power and strength in emotions rather than, so much of our gente always feel like I have to be strong, right? I have to be strong, and strength is equated with not crying. When children get their shots, it's, oh, they were so brave, they were so
Right.
strong because they didn't cry. And it's like, what message are we sending? We are sending that tears are burdens. We are sending that tears are weakness. And we really need to be curious and change the language that we are using, because there is the message that we're speaking, and then there's also the meta message that is being received, again because burdens are passed down covertly and overtly, that children are hearing.
Mhm.
And when we are when and I remember this as a kid myself, like when you see like your parent cry and you have the sense, like you have the energetics, right, are in the space,
Mhm.
and you feel that they're sad, you feel that. And when you approach your caregiver, your parent, and they say, no, mi hija estoy bien, whatever,
Mhm.
but it on a core level,
Mhm.
it can actually send a message to the child, to the child, right? That they're kind of being gaslit, and
Yeah.
and kind of, and of course unintended, but it's happening even when the intention is to try to protect them, right, from
Mhm.
emotions, against their narrative of why do we feel like we need to protect our children from emotions and from our emotions and our vulnerability. And two, our children already know, because they are very attuned human beings, right? They are incredibly intelligent and wise, and they pick up on the energies in the environment, our energies. And so us letting them know, what you just said, like, I'm
Yeah.
not okay, but I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to just cry this out. I'm going to figure it out. That is teaching them that there's power in their vulnerability, and that they don't have to fear that vulnerability,
Mhm.
And also it's teaching them like, okay, I was right. I was attuned to
Yeah.
my mom in this moment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And for folks hearing, like my son now, he's 13 and he sees me crying and he'll give me a hug and then he'll go about and play in his world, play with his friends. And that's okay because there's no expectations, right? At that point from my end, from his, I appreciate the sweet gestures. So I think it heals longer than what we may realize. Another thing I want to mention before we go into our final questions is that secrecy is more so, or holding secrets is more of a convenience for us in the moment, but an inconvenience for our healing and mental health in the future. Again, it
Absolutely.
is not prevention. So, what are ways, Natalie, that we can reverse the cycle of secrecy, especially when it comes to secrecy? Well, I was going to say within the family towards youth, but just in general, because there's also people that suffer from secrecy when they are adoptees, right? So just on
Mm.
a wide range of scale for people listening, tuning in that can relate to this topic, what are ways that they can reverse the cycle of secrecy?
Ooh, there, I think at the root is going to be one, seeing how we are holding that, seeing the secrets that we have been holding and coming to terms with that and witnessing that within ourselves. And I think little by little, we need to start inviting in conversations with, maybe we can start with people that we feel the safest with in our families so that we can start modeling conversations that are, I want to say, are overdue. I think we need to start there. I think we need to start with leaning in and then inviting conversations within our families, starting with the people that we feel safest with. What also comes up for me around that, Adriana, is the word compassion. I think we also I think it's important to also offer ourselves and also the people in our family some compassion around why they may have wanted to hold on to these secrets, because so much of the time that narrative of I need to hold on to this is not because they actually really want to hold on to this, because they know deep inside at their core it's hurting, it is not helping, it is hurting. But a lot of the time we hear from the larger systems that we're supposed to just go, 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 because these are internalized messages that we received from patriarchy or from capitalism. And again, also part of this is due from or stems from the remnants of historical trauma. You don't have time to talk about your feelings because you have to get to the next job to make that money to help your family, or you don't have time to talk about these feelings because if I have this conversation, if I talk about my feelings, it's going to open up a whole gate to all this grief that I have not been trying to, that I can't deal with. Because if I lean into this grief, if I get to know it, if we have these hard conversations, it's going to open Pandora's box and I'm going to drown in my tears and I'm not going to be able to show up for work and I'm not going to be able to, you know, function. Right. And so I think that it's important to offer compassion as to, toward our family for all the reasons why we have been conditioned and then have continued to perpetuate that conditioning around holding that secret, or those secrets, and then begin to slowly have these conversations. And I say slowly, and I think it's important to pace ourselves, because I think a lot of the time we also want to like boom, right? And then that can also be really jarring for folks' nervous systems too. So I think it's important to have all of these conversations. We want to talk about all the generational wounding, and also can we talk about it in doses, not all of it at the same time? Can this be ongoing conversations, not just one?
Yeah. And we're towards the end, but other elements coming up are like, the families that are going through infidelity or have been
Mhm.
through infidelity. And now there are step brothers and sisters, siblings in the picture. And that's again another thing that's so common with our grandparents, with our parents, even from other countries, wherever they are at. Like, it's just there's so much harm. And I think, as you're talking about compassion, one, it's compassion within yourself, right?
Yeah.
And not blaming yourself for not knowing the secret.
Yeah.
Another thing that's like, sorry, ADHD brain, but coming in is like the secret when loved ones pass away, right? And not telling them in that moment. So again, like when we first started this conversation with Natalie, we gave that disclaimer that this is such a broad topic. There are so many generational wounds that can get carried under secrecy. And so we hope that this conversation can start your journey of awareness, of that self-compassion. And if you feel the need to provide that compassion to someone else, then that journey as well. But everybody heals and goes through this at a different pace. Where you are at in regards to wanting to talk about it, unfortunately, other family members may not be ready to even open that door and have that conversation about this secret with you. Unfortunately, that is a very sad reality. And so we encourage you to also think about what are other ways you can explore these answers. And with that, in terms of reversing this cycle of secrecy, is also getting help, in whatever ways. If that means therapy, psychotherapy, mental health therapy services, go for it. If that means other forms of healings, Reiki, nature therapy, or tarot cards, anything, any other form of healing, limpias, please.
Yes.
Let's integrate everything. I know for myself, because it's all lived in my body, a lot of body work, chiropractic work, with somebody that I feel safe with, because I've gone through chiropractors where había algo, or they said something and I didn't feel safe anymore, right? So finding that provider in any context that you feel safe with to release the burdens of these secrets.
Yeah, I really just appreciate everything that you're saying. It's therapy is hard, because sometimes it's not for everyone, and sometimes the therapist is not for everyone, and sometimes it's also inaccessible. So how do we lean on community? And I think that is the important part of the healing work, is how do we lean on community? How do we heal together in connection? Whether it's through, like Adriana was saying, all of the body work, and then also how do we also connect with other people? How do we find other people so that we're not feeling so alone? Because I think part of what also strengthens the shame that we carry is that we're also holding this all by ourselves, which again is going to maintain, it's going to have us influence, it's going to influence us to continue to hold that secret. And it's just so heavy. These secrets are so heavy, and you deserve your healing. You deserve to not have to carry these secrets. So even if it's you just journaling an untold story that you have, even if you are just journaling it and witnessing it yourself, and that is the start, that is an amazing, huge, important step in the process. Like Adriana said, how do we also witness ourselves and those untold stories that are carrying that shame, and that are therefore like having us maintain the secrecy?
Natalie, I also want to be sure that we address this question that I think we answered throughout our segment, but they submitted it in the comments section. What's the best way to deal with anxiety, shock, and overall feelings of finding out big family and life-shattering secrets about your family later in life, right? So in adulthood, things that have been hidden all your life. So I think we touched upon how you can reverse that cycle. Natalie alluded to journaling, and we discussed how therapy can be a form to release that, but also other forms of healing are completely appropriate. It's whatever you feel you need in your body, and how to go about these conversations if you choose to do so. Do you feel like we got that, Nat?
Yeah, I think just one little piece to add, I think it's important to also ask, like, what now? Like, where do we go from here? Because I know for myself, sometimes I go back and I'm like, but why? And this, and I just have so many questions around that, right? And it can flood my own nervous system, that it's important to even write down the questions that we have, knowing that some of these questions may never be answered, and tending to the grief around that, and continuing to pour into ourselves, tend to the anxiety and the fear that might be attached to that anxiety, and seek people, seek connection, and see what now, right? If family is wanting to work these things out together and continue to have ongoing conversations, that the door be open to that, if the person, if the
Mhm.
person is wanting that. But really just continuing to make sure that they're clear within themselves also what they're wanting, and not keeping that a secret.
Yes, yes. Again, so broad, and this
Yeah.
can also lead what Natalie's talking about is also touching upon the boundaries, right, that may be necessary to set in place after finding out whatever you have found out, and knowing that some of these boundaries may lead to family estrangement, needing to be separated for a certain amount of time, an unknown amount of time, or indefinitely. Again, everybody's case is so different, but we hope that this conversation was helpful for you all that are dealing with this. We invite you to ask any questions in the comment sections and to add to this conversation so that people watching also don't feel so alone, especially if you're in a much more healed place, right, where you can talk about it from that perspective of yours. So, with that, we'll have to conclude here. We can have a series on this as well as so many other topics that we discuss, but our hearts are with you all. This is something that, again, is experienced so personally, commonly, unfortunately. But Natalie, to kind of segment out, because we've also gone a little bit over time here. What are your current projects, and where can people find more about what you're up to? Because you're up to so many different things.
Yeah, I appreciate that, hermana. So I'm actually hosting an 8-week Latinx healing circle that is talking about just this very thing around legacy burdens and generational wounding. And I'll be offering that annually. And then I also offer just other groups, and that just tied again to generational wounding and complex post-traumatic stress. And folks that are interested can find these offerings at my website, which is nataliegutierrez.com. And I have a retreat that is also coming up that I'm co-facilitating with a colleague that we both know, Dr. Lidiana Garcia, which is around this thing as well, around releasing the burdens that we're carrying and reclaiming our medicine and reclaiming our sense of self. That's happening in Puerto Rico. And all my groups are open to everyone in the community, not just therapists. It's open to everyone. We all need our healing, not just therapists and professionals. So
And is it to anybody across across the world?
across the world.
Okay, wonderful. So, with that, thank you, Natalie, so much
Thank
for
you.
this plática that means so much to so many of us. And with that, please support Natalie's work. As you know, she is the author of The Pain We Carry, and has so many amazing projects going on. NatalieYGutierrez.com is where you can find her work. All right, everybody.
Thank
Gracias.
you. Thank you all. Gracias.